As we speak, Rishi Sunak has on his desk a report into the bullying allegations against his Deputy Prime Minister, Dominic Raab. He'll be considering the severity of the findings and then deciding, does he need to give his Deputy Prime Minister the chop? Sunak has already said he doesn't recognise the characterisation of Raab's behaviour as the man he knows. So, would sacking Raab simply be a political surrender to whinging civil servants who have now levelled accusations against 4 Conservative cabinet ministers? Let's start with yourself as a Labour man. The writing on the wall, or is this just yet more whinging from entitled civil servants?
Well, I don't know where this whinging civil servant thing has come from. The case here is that there are serious allegations of bullying that are being reported on. And if the conduct of Dominic Raab is proven to be unbecoming in a government minister, then he should resign. And if not, he should carry on with his duties. To be fair and sort of broadly historical about it, there have been ministers across governments accused of bullying and bad behaviour. These things get looked into. It's got nothing to do with millennial whingers.
You seem to think, though, that the public sector seems to like all the perks of working in the public sector, the pensions, the holidays, work from home in your pyjamas, don't bother going to the office. But when they get private sector-style management, which, let's face it, can be a bit rough and tumble, they don't seem to like it, do they?
No, I think that's a characterisation, Martin, that I don't share. The public sector is full of very robust, hard-nosed people. I saw it serving many years in local government as a councillor in London. I just don't buy into that narrative. I think, some of the reports you read about how Dominic Raab conducts himself are less than ideal.
Yeah, OK. Ella, let's bring you in now. So Dominic Raab, you think he's a tyrant or himself the victim of a bit of a whinging campaign?
I think it's probably a bit of both, which is that he doesn't sound like the nicest person in the world, does he? And he's, I don't know, maybe it's short man syndrome or something. He seems like without your kind of stereotypical angry guy, which probably you have to be an effective minister. He's not a very effective politician. We know that he's got some very serious failings, particularly in the way in which he handled the issues with Afghanistan. And I'd like to see him pinned on those substantial issues rather than these kind of allegations of bullying. But I suppose, who knows? We've got to find out what actually has gone on. Any of the stuff that's been sort of leaked or suggested to has sounded kind of pathetic in terms of civil servants being perhaps a little bit thin-skinned, but then again, we all know that the business of politics is pretty dirty. Why doesn't someone just gob in his Pret-a-Manger smoothie rather than making it the business of all of us to yet again have to sit here and talk about bullying in Parliament? I think for me, the thing I take away from it is that this isn't the first allegation of bullying in Westminster. Right. And rather than thinking that, we're sort of run by a cabal of awful, horrible people that don't, treat people nicely, it actually sounds a bit more sort of run-of-the-mill sort of school playground to me. And there are some very serious political crises and questions that need to be answered. Can we get on with doing that rather than sort of all this?
I think many restaurant staff might identify with your kind of special mayonnaise type revenge. But Kevin, Ella makes a great point there about the double standards. Don't forget, somebody who defected to the Labour Party, a certain Mr John Bercow, he faced far more serious allegations than this, which were borne out to be more or less true. But the Labour Party then will say, well, let's wait for the full report. Let's not haste to make judgments. But they've been very quick to damn Raab without even knowing what the findings of this report are. So double standards.
Well, I heard you saying before we came on you were going to stick it to me, but I don't know if this is that moment. But I don't know what you're on about. I mean, the Labour Party is saying wait for the findings of the inquiry. And I, rather balancedly, if that's a word, said these things happen to politicians of all persuasions. So I don't think there's anything to do with the Labour Party's stance here. They do, I think Ella's quite right that his record in politics is much more interesting to discuss. If he is, I have a feeling that he's not going to make it. The way that if you follow these stories, it looks like Sunak hasn't got his back on this because of those bullying allegations.
So do you think the fact that Rishi is sleeping on this is an indication that there's a foreboding sense, or is this pure speculation?
We don't know. Us three don't know. Others don't know. But if you follow politics and the media, as we all do in different ways, it feels to me like he could be in a bit of bother tomorrow.
Yeah. So Ella, back to the Burko point. I didn't stick it to you, but I think it is worth.
Before I came on, you
out.
said I've got to stick it to that Labour guy when he gets on tonight, and here we are. I'm just asking if that was sticking it
just
to me.
Just getting warmed up. Kev.
Okay, good.
This is just the entree.
Come on, loosen up. Come on.
I'll give you the mayonnaise topping in a bit, as it were. That came out all wrong. Ella, there is definitely, I think, double standards in this. You know, John Burko, the bullying allegations against him were dealt with in a far more sympathetic manner by the Liberal press, all because of his position on Brexit.
Yeah, I think there is definitely, biases play into this. And, it doesn't matter how nasty someone is in the office if they're doing working on the kind of policy that you agree with. And Burko was a really good example of that. I mean, but again, I didn't really care about him shouting at people, didn't really care about him having stickers with expletives that I can't say at this time of day on in the back of his car, whatever. I cared about the fact that he had significant influence on the process of discussions about Brexit in the seat of power of British politics. So, a lot of people got their knickers in a twist about Angela Rayner using the word scum. All this stuff kind of goes on and mudslinging happens at PMQs and all that kind of thing. Most of us don't care. Most of us kind of roll our eyes and say, would you just get on with the job of doing what we want you to do? I think in particular the Conservative Party is guilty of introspection. We've just, with the kind of furore we've had with however many prime ministers they've had in the last sort of year, they are obsessed with looking up their own backside. And I think this is a sort of symptomatic of it. It's just deal with it, sack him if you want to sack him. Please, let's not make it news anymore.
Yeah, Kev, so you talked about you've seen some pretty robust behaviour in the public sector historically, but is it worth dwelling on the fact that is this a generational thing? Are younger people much more sensitive now to hurty words, tweets, feelings like that? Because they have been cosseted. I know you talk about this a lot, the fact that there's a special sort of snowflakey element. Are younger people taking offence to things that back in my day, would have been just brushed off? Right.
Well, I think that's a very interesting, good point because, you've got great experience this as a former editor of Loaded. Is that correct, right? Back in the day. But I now have got over 100 colleagues in the business I founded. I've done 5 years previously in my career in a very aggressive law firm environment, not dissimilar to where Dominic Raab actually spent time before Parliament. And my generalisation is that the workplace nowadays is a more kinder, sensitive place. OK, well, let's throw this question out to the audience. What do you make of this? Is it just snowflakes? Is it millennial whingers? Or is there a point? Should there be proper standards in public life? What do you think? Back to you. Is it young people just being hypersensitive? Do they need to just grow a thicker skin? Well, it's not. I mean, that makes it sound kind of glib, but I do think there is a problem. We have, some very serious things happening, for example, in schools where, you're not allowed to... serious. They have serious consequences. Not allowed to use red pen. You're not allowed any kind of criticism. Genuine constructive criticism on young people is seen to be very damaging. And actually, a lot of the time, I think we don't treat young people with the robust respect that they deserve. They're very resilient. There's nothing about being young that means that you can't take a knock or a bit of criticism, or even that you can't take a harsh boss having a go at you in the workplace. I think we too often jump ahead and say, we almost give them the label of snowflakes before they even ask for it. And I think that's a problem because we are raising a generation of people who aren't able to engage in the real world, because in the real world there are bullies. I mean, if books have trigger warnings, if words are erased from languages, and are we not seeing very much the product of a pampered generation? And actually, is there something to be said for robust management breeding toughness into employees, and it can actually help to foster toughness in the workforce that's useful? Well, so it's, it has to be what's the purpose of the toughness? Someone just having a go at you because they're, a diva kind of minister, which I civil servants whisper in my ear that there's lots of them in Parliament who, want their handbag carried and want to be called minister and that kind of thing. That's no good. But if you're in the business of trying to do something serious, of which Dominic Raab is supposed to be, of getting, putting in place policy changes and law that will make a difference to people's lives, supposedly, then I don't mind cracking the whip if that's what's necessary. And it does sound to me like Dominic Raab, as much as his political failings are evident, he doesn't sound to me like a kind of heinous bully. I think, if you're at the point where you're, as allegedly is happening, vomiting before meetings with your boss, I think you probably have to look at yourself as much as saying what's going on in that meeting, because there's very little in life that would make me puke before a meeting. So, Kevin, could
could there be a benefit from some of that older, more robust management to this younger workforce? You know, a bit of a mix and match. So don't kind of wrap them in cotton wool, but don't be like an old school tyrant. But toughness is good, especially in politics. You've got to be tough. Or we're just pampering to these people.
I can't even answer the question because I don't buy into the broad assumptions behind it. You know, that young people are snowflakey, weak rather, or soft, or I just don't buy into it. The workplace now is much more civilised. Bullying is less accepted. That's a great thing.
So what kind of robust behaviour that you mentioned did you actually see that was useful, and what was
Well, just, you know, big corporate lawyers coming into a guy coming into a room, singling out one of the newest junior guys who just arrived. Went, "Morning, ladies. How are you?" You know, giving him a little rub around the cheeks with it. You know, grabbing his cheeks and all this stuff. Just weird and old school. You know, you can't do that now.
Yeah, that's like Ron Burgundy style sexism. I don't think anybody is advocating a return to those days. But surely, like, you're allowed to raise your voice. You're allowed to criticise people's work. Because if you criticise, you can improve.
I think, sorry, just to jump in, there's you know, I think that I think is a problem is if we have layer upon layer upon layer of rules and regulations in workplaces where, you know, we dictate to the very nth degree how people can relate to each other. I think that is a genuine problem because, you know, like it or loathe it, lots of us spend the majority of our lives at work with the people that we work with and with our bosses, and to feel like you're constantly stepping on eggshells is, I think, a problem. And you know, as much as I agree with Kevin that I don't want to go back to, you know, Mad Men style kind of, you know, ridiculousness. I do think that we are becoming too dependent on workplace regulation, too dependent on HR probably in a way, rather than just, that's why, you know, I jokingly say spit in his smoothie. What I actually mean is, why does this have to get to the level of kind of complaints that we're discussing as if this was, you know, the biggest political issue of the day? Why can't it be sorted out amongst ourselves? And I think a more informal workplace actually will make particularly workers feel a lot less like they're being policed all the time.
OK, well, I come from here. I was at News of the World back on those newsroom floors where it was absolutely savage. Yeah. And oftentimes you would leave the place shaking, but you always went back the next day and you strove to be better. I think there's something in that. It's got you going out there. There's been loads of comments coming in. Go through a quick few of those now. Paul, if Rob has bullied clerical or typists, sack him. If he dealt robustly with the public school, Oxbridge, £100,000 a year, Daddy was something in the civil service before me, Sir Humphreys, then they should suck it up. So he's basically saying if you're well off and entitled, you deserve to be treated a bit more harsh. That might go down well with HR. Paul. Mike, oh dear, I've been bullied. Absolute whingers. And the civil servant said if he's found guilty of this terrible, grievous offence, they will all walk away. Fantastic. Go for a long walk. That's Mike, not very big on the sympathy so far. Richard, it's got everything to do with delicate, work-shy snowflakes. They will all be OK if Captain Softy gets in. I think he's talking about your friend there, Keir Starmer. And Margaret, a Labour MP, has been suspended and being investigated. Why isn't this getting as much coverage and no mention of him in Parliament? A little bit of bias there. OK, that was a superb debate to open the show.